So, Madam Chairperson, Srimati Nutan Guha Biswas ji, Dr. Arun Gupta, Dr. Vandana Prasad, distinguished panelists, Dr. Khera, Dr. Sharma, Dr. Sabha, Rajita, and other esteemed colleagues present here today. Well, first of all, I would just like to congratulate all the organizations, government, and partners who've been involved in this initiative and in the assessment, and of course, specifically the India assessment, IPFAN, BPNI, PHRN particularly. And I think this has generated very valuable insights. And we have, of course, had the opportunity, I think, to reflect also and identify areas where intensified efforts are needed. After such excellent and comprehensive presentations, both by Dr. Gupta and Dr. Vandana Prasad, who I would really like to congratulate for those presentations, I think now I would just like to focus on 2 or 3 points which came out during the presentations and see where we could move with those. I would also like to say at the outset, this report is very timely. Of course, today is the first day of the National Nutrition Week 2015. Better nutrition, key to development, very appropriate. And also it is coming, I think, at a juncture when the new or upcoming, I should say, National Nutrition Mission would be taking shape, and also the midterm appraisal of the 12th plan would be taking shape. So while there's been some improvement which has been mentioned, strikingly, I think for all of us, the report also brings out some sort of a disconnect between policy and practice. And on the one hand, we are justifiably proud of the fact that we have one of the best legislations in the world, globally recognized, the IMS and its Amendment Act. And we also have very good national guidelines. We also have a National Development Plan, the 12th five-year plan, which recognizes the criticality of infant and young child feeding for fulfilling children's rights. But at the same time, I think we do reflect and look at the areas where we need to do much more, and at family level, community level, programmatic level. So I've picked out 2 or 3 because I think while we have the details, I just think some of these require a little more attention. I think the point that Vandana made when she was talking about the institutional mechanisms, and I would think we are aware, of course, that there has been recently some reactivation of the National Infant and Young Child Feeding Committee, and it would probably sort of be looking at a host of issues. There's also the issue of what happens at state level. Could we think of having state IYCF committees as was envisaged at one stage? And the reason I say this is because actually that is a forum where a lot of the multi-sectoral action, the coordination does come together, and a lot of these operational gaps do get discussed and addressed. And I say this because I still remember the one meeting that we did have of the National Breastfeeding Committee, I think it was early 2005, was where the committee made the recommendation that the IMS Act should not be repealed. And I think it was the minutes of that committee which actually then played a major role in preventing the repealing of the IMS Act. So that's just one point I would like to flag, with the additionality that we need to think of state level mechanisms as well. The second point I would like to flag, which I think came through in what Dr. Khera also spelled out very well in terms of a lot of the recent actions taken, is could we think of a national plan of action for infant and young child feeding, time bound, monitorable outcomes. Again, this plan would put together exactly what you described, and the various activities that are taking place, the various initiatives that the Ministry of WCD is putting together, but bring it together in a whole which addresses a lot of the recommendations made by this report. So if it's the issue of addressing maternity entitlements and childcare, this plan would have a section related to that. If it's an issue related to HIV and infant feeding, this plan would have something related to that. Training, capacity building, community action, monitoring and evaluation. Because I think what we do have is we have definite commitments, a lot of things are going on, but perhaps putting them together in this time-bound way with monitorable outcomes would help. And the other thing is that similarly, this would not be something which comes as a sort of a top-down driven kind of thing, but it would build really on state plans of action for infant and young child feeding. I say this also because, we had in the early part of this year, in Panipat, Bhopal, Dehradun, Delhi, various places, we had a lot of consultations with states about the upcoming National Nutrition Mission. And one point that the states came up with repeatedly was the need to have either at regional level some sort of cluster support or some sort of discussion on the how to. You see, the will or the intent to do something is there, but the discussion on how to make this happen, how to make this run. So I think that is why I would like to flag this as a sort of a second issue which I saw coming through. The third one, and this really builds on Dr. Khera's comments and listening to him and the earlier presentations, I think we do have a task ahead, that we do have national and state program implementation plans for the National Health Mission, which now with the guidance note put out is definitely, giving more attention to this area. We do have national and state ICDS program implementation plans. I think what we really need to see is how do the infant and young child feeding monitorable outcomes and the components get reflected in both of these. Because just to give one example, the issue of skill counseling support, we need to look holistically perhaps and see what percentage of villages, what percentages of blocks, what percentages of districts, and especially districts where you may have a higher burden of the problem of undernutrition, would we be able to say that skilled counseling support has been provided, linking both the systems together? Or, for example, as Dr. Khera mentioned, what percentage of health facilities could we say have, become baby-friendly or are providing services in that direction? So these are, I have just flagged, I think, some major issues because as I see, the other issues will feed into or be influenced by these. And I think that we will be discussing some more. And perhaps another thought that comes to my mind is, I don't want to take more time, but especially when we're looking at the enhanced leadership role of states, the, sort of issues of a larger role in their decision making and so on, I think I would like to just conclude by expressing the hope that maybe in the future sometime we could look at an adapted, should I call it state breastfeeding trends initiative, which maps the progress of different states and union territories in the area of infant and young child feeding, which would provide the basis for a lot of future policy and program development. Thank you so much for this opportunity.